The slam of the door in my face echoed through the entire residential street. Jessica, my oldest daughter, had just shut me out without mercy. I knocked on the second house, the one belonging to Michael, my middle son. He opened it just a crack, handed me a crumpled $50 bill, and pushed me away while muttering something about his professional reputation. 2 children, 2 rejections, 2 direct stabs to the heart of a mother who had given everything for them. But when I knocked on the third door, the humblest one, the one furthest from the wealthy district, something changed. Daniel opened it. My youngest son, the teacher with the miserable salary that the whole family despises, and by his side was Sarah, the daughter-in-law everyone hated for not having money or a famous last name. They did not hesitate. They welcomed me in from the cold as if it were the only right thing to do in the world. That night, sitting on their worn-out sofa, I heard them whispering in the kitchen about selling their wedding rings to get me food. They did not know I could hear them. They did not know who I really was. And when the next morning my lawyer, Robert, appeared with the security team at that tiny house, when the truth came to light in front of everyone, the faces of Jessica and Michael no longer showed contempt. They showed terror because they had just lost everything. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the exact moment I decided to do this test. To the night I understood that I had created monsters with my own money. It all started 3 weeks earlier in my office on the 23rd floor. I am Linda Miller. For 35 years, I built a textile empire that supplies the main clothing chains across the continent. When my husband died 12 years ago, everyone thought the company would collapse. The partners bet on my failure. The competitors sharpened their knives, waiting to divide the remains. But I did not crumble. I worked 18 hours a day. I learned every aspect of the business my husband managed. I negotiated with banks, with international suppliers, with difficult clients who did not respect a woman in this industry. I swallowed humiliations that would have broken anyone. And I did not just keep the company afloat. I multiplied it by 5. And do you know who I did all that for? For my 3 children. To give them the life I never had. So they would never feel the bite of hunger like I felt as a child. So they would have opportunities. Education opened doors everywhere. Jessica studied in Switzerland. I paid for an MBA that cost over $120,000. Michael did his medical degree at an elite private university. I invested $200,000 in his education. Daniel, my youngest son, was the only one who chose a state university. He wanted to be a teacher. The other 2 mocked him for years for that decision. I gave them everything. Houses, cars, trips, connections. Every time they called me, I opened my checkbook. Every time they had a problem, I solved it with money. I became a walking ATM for my own children. But that night in January, sitting in my empty office, looking at the financial statements of the allowances I had given them over all these years, something broke inside me. I had just received 3 calls. All 3 on the same day. Jessica wanted $100,000 to remodel her kitchen. Michael needed $70,000 to invest in some business with a friend. And Daniel, my Daniel, only called to ask how my health was. That difference hit me like a hammer. 2 children who only called me when they needed money. One who called just to know about me. It was at that moment that I made the decision. I would do a test, the ultimate test. I would disappear. I would pretend to be bankrupt on the street with nothing. and I would knock on their doors asking for shelter. I wanted to see who would open, who would be ashamed, who would remember that I am their mother before being their source of money. I asked Robert, my trusted lawyer, to keep the secret. He tried to dissuade me. He told me it was too hard, too risky for a 61-year-old woman. But I had already decided. I needed to know the truth. I needed to see their naked hearts without the disguise that money allowed them to wear. I put my jewelry in the safe. I put on old clothes I found in a thrift store, a worn grey coat that smelled of mothballs, stained pants, shoes with peeling soles. I dirted my hands with earth. I left my hair unwashed for 3 days. I tied my belongings in a torn plastic bag. I looked in the mirror and did not recognize the woman staring back at me. I looked like a homeless person. I looked invisible. I looked exactly like what I needed to look like for this test to work. The plan was simple but brutal. I would walk to their houses. I would knock on their doors. I would tell them I had lost everything, that I needed a place to sleep. Just that, nothing more. And I would observe. I would observe their reactions, their words, their gestures. The truth always comes to the surface when people do not have time to rehearse their lies. Robert got me a burner phone. He told me to call him if anything went wrong. That I would have a car waiting 2 blocks away at all times. That the security team would be watching from a distance. But I was not going to call. This had to be real. It had to hurt. It had to be authentic because only in true pain is the true character of people revealed. The first night I left my penthouse. I left behind the warmth, the silk sheets, the panoramic view of the illuminated city. I went down 23 floors and went out into the street. The February cold welcomed me like a slap. There was no turning back. I walked for hours. My feet filled with blisters. The plastic bag tore and I had to carry my things in my arms. People dodged me on the sidewalks. Some looked at me with pity, others with contempt. Most simply ignored me as if I were a part of the street furniture. I spent the night at the bus station. The smell of urine and desperation stuck to my clothes. An older woman shared a piece of hard bread with me. She told me she had been on the street for 5 years, that her children had forgotten her. While she spoke, I thought, will that be me in a few years if I do not do something now? By the 3rd day, I was ready. Dirty, hungry, frozen to the bone, but ready. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I would go first to Jessica's house, then to Michael's, and finally to the small house of Daniel and Sarah. I did not know what I would find, but I was about to discover it. Jessica's mansion shone like an obscene jewel in the middle of the most exclusive neighborhood in the city. Golden gates, gardens pruned with millimeter precision, a stone fountain at the entrance. I recognized every detail because I had paid the down payment for that property. $200,000 I took from my personal savings when she got married 7 years ago. I stood in front of the electronic gate. My legs were trembling, not only from 3 days sleeping on park benches, but for what I was about to do. I pressed the intercom button. I heard the buzz, then silence. I pressed again. Jessica's voice came out metallic through the speaker. She did not even bother to ask who it was. She just said in a bored tone that she was not buying anything at the door. I told her it was me, her mother. There was a long pause, too long. Then I heard the click of the gate opening just a few inches. I pushed the gate and walked up the stone path I had helped design myself. Every step was a painful irony. The front door opened before I arrived. Jessica appeared in the frame, but she did not come out. She stayed there, blocking the entrance with her body as if I were an annoying street vendor. She was wearing a salmon-colored athletic outfit that probably cost more than most people earn in a month. Her hair was perfectly styled, her nails freshly done. Everything about her screamed money, comfort, superficiality. She looked me up and down with an expression I will never forget. It was not concern. It was disgust. "Mom," she finally said, dragging out the word as if it burned her tongue. "What are you doing here?" She did not even ask it. She stated it as if my presence were an inconvenience that needed immediate explanation. I told her the truth I had prepared. That I had lost everything. That the company went bankrupt. That the creditors took my house. That I had been on the street for 3 days. That I just needed a place to sleep while I figured out how to solve my situation. My own daughter listened to me without moving a muscle in her face. When I finished speaking, she looked over my shoulder toward the neighboring houses. She was more worried about who might be seeing me standing in her driveway than about what I had just told her. That gesture went through me like a rusty knife. "Mom, this is not a good time," she said, lowering her voice. "Robert has an important dinner with partners tonight. I can't deal with these types of situations right now." Situations? She called me a situation as if I were a plumbing problem or a leak in the roof. I begged her, and I hate to admit that I did, but I needed to see how far her coldness went. I told her it would only be for one night, that I would sleep anywhere, in the maid's room, in the garage, wherever. I just needed a roof. Jessica shook her head. Her diamond earrings sparkled with the movement. Those earrings I gave her for her last birthday. $5,000 in precious stones hanging from the ears of a daughter who had no room for her mother in her 6-bedroom house. "You can't stay here," she said firmly. "This would affect our reputation at the club. The neighbors talk. You know how this is. Besides, if you are really in financial trouble, the last thing you need is to be around people who are going to judge you. It is for your own good, Mom. For my own good." She wrapped her rejection in a layer of false inverted maternal concern. As if she were doing me a favor by slamming the door in my face. I tried to take a step forward. She stepped back and closed the door until only a crack remained. "There are shelters," she said. "Charity organizations. Surely you will find something. And when you solve your situation, when things improve, we talk. But right now, I can't help you. I'm sorry." She did not feel it. That was the most horrible thing. Her voice did not have a shred of genuine pain. She was just in a hurry to end this uncomfortable conversation and return to her perfect world of appearances and superficiality. "Jessica," I said using her full name. "Please, I am your mother. I changed your diapers. I taught you to walk. I paid for your education, your wedding, this house. Everything you have came from me." Her face hardened, and there I saw something that froze my blood more than any night on the street. I saw resentment, as if every single thing I had done for her was a debt that overwhelmed her, as if my motherly love was an unbearable burden she had been waiting to drop. "Exactly, Mom," she said with poison in every syllable. "You gave everything. You were always giving, controlling, deciding. Now that you have nothing, you expect me to return everything to you as if it were an investment. Well, it doesn't work that way. I have my own life, my own responsibilities. I can't carry your financial mistakes. The door closed. I heard the deadbolt turning. The sound of that metal sliding was like hearing the coffin of our relationship closing forever. I stood there looking at the solid mahogany wood I had helped pay for. Through the side window, I saw Jessica walk back to her living room, pick up her phone dial, and start talking to someone while laughing. I walked away from that house, feeling something worse than sadness. I felt empty, as if a part of me had stayed on the other side of that closed door. The daughter I raised, the girl who hugged me when she had nightmares, the young woman who cried on my shoulder when her first boyfriend dumped her no longer existed. She had been replaced by this cold woman who valued the opinion of her neighbors more than the well-being of her own mother. I walked 2 miles until I reached the neighborhood where Michael lived. My feet were bleeding inside the broken shoes. Hunger made me see black spots every time I moved my head too fast. But I kept going because I needed to complete this test. I needed to know if all my children were the same or if there was any humanity left in any of them. Michael's house was more modern than Jessica's. All glass and steel. Minimalist. Cold like him. I rang the doorbell and waited. This time there was no delay. Michael opened the door almost immediately as if he had been expecting a delivery or something. His expression when he saw me was genuine shock. "Mom," he exclaimed, and for a second, I thought maybe he would be different. "What happened to you?" He seemed worried. His eyes scanned my dirty clothes, my greasy hair, the torn bag I was carrying. He took a step toward me, and I thought he would hug me. He didn't. Instead, he looked quickly to both sides of the street, just like Jessica. The same concern for appearances. The same fear that someone would see them with me. "Come in quickly," he said, ushering me inside, but closing the door immediately behind me as if he were hiding evidence of a crime. I stayed in the foyer. He did not invite me further inside. I kept my distance as if my poverty were contagious. "What happened?" he repeated. "Where have you been? Why didn't you call?" I told him the same story. Bankruptcy, losses, street, need for temporary shelter. Michael listened to me with his arms crossed. I saw his brain working. I saw the calculations forming behind his eyes. He was not thinking about how to help me. He was thinking about how to get rid of me in the fastest and least problematic way possible. When I finished speaking, he sighed. A long tired sigh as if I were a difficult patient in his office and not his mother. "Mom, I have a reputation to maintain. I am a cardiovascular surgeon. My patients are important people, politicians, businessmen. If anyone finds out that my mother is living on the street, that affects my practice. You understand, right?" "No," I told him with total honesty. "I don't understand." Michael took out his wallet. The leather was Italian. I recognized it because I had given it to him for his birthday 2 years ago. It cost $800. He took out some bills, $50 in total. He held it out to me, but without getting close, as if he were afraid to touch me. "Take this," he said. "Go to a cheap hotel, rest, take a shower. When you are presentable, we can talk about how to solve your situation. But you can't stay here. I have surgeries tomorrow morning. I need concentration." I can't have this distraction. Distraction? His homeless mother was a distraction. I did not take the money. I stood there staring him straight in the eyes, looking for some trace of the boy who used to run to my arms when I came home from work. The boy who told me that when he grew up, he would buy me a big house so I would never have to work so hard. That boy had died at some point, and I hadn't even noticed the funeral. Michael, I said with a broken voice. I spent entire nights studying with you for your medical exams. I brought you coffee at 3 o'clock in the morning when you stayed up reviewing when you couldn't pay for textbooks that cost $500 each. I sold my jewelry to buy them for you. And now you offer me $50 and call me a distraction. He clenched his jaw. The bills were still extended between us like a physical barrier. Mom, it's not personal, he said with that clinical voice he probably used to give bad news to his patients' families. It's just that right now I am not in a position to help you the way you need. I have my family to support my own expenses. I can't simply carry another person. Another person that was me to him. Another person. Not his mother. Not the woman who sacrificed her own dreams to finance his, just another person who needed something from him and inconvenienced him. I took the $50, not because I needed them, but because I wanted to see if even that pathetic gesture would cause him any kind of emotion. Nothing. His face remained neutral, professional, distant, as if he had just completed an unpleasant but necessary business transaction. Now, I need you to leave, he said, pointing to the door. Seriously, Mom, I have to wake up early. I can't be dealing with this right now. When you stabilize, call me and we'll see what we can do. But you have to understand that I also have my limits. He put his hand on my shoulder, not with affection, but with firmness. He was guiding me toward the exit. He was literally pushing me out of his life. When we reached the door, he opened it and signaled me to leave. The cold night air hit me again. Take care, he said. And honestly, Mom, you should have been more careful with your investments. At your age, you should already have everything secured. This shouldn't be happening. He was blaming me. He was telling me this was my fault. That if I was on the street, it was because I had been irresponsible. The son whose $200,000 education I paid for was giving me lessons on financial management while kicking me out of his house. The door closed. This time I didn't hear the deadbolt because Michael had already disappeared inside his house before I even finished walking down the porch steps. He didn't even stay to make sure I got away safely. He simply closed it and left. I stood under the yellowish light of the garden lamp. The $50 were crumpled in my hand. I looked at them as if they were poison. This dirty paper was what my relationship with my son was worth. $50, less than what he probably spent on any random dinner. I put the money in my pocket. I would use it later, not for me, but to remind myself that this had happened, that this was real, that my two oldest children had rejected me on the same day without even blinking. 2 doors closed, 2 children. Lost. I had one left. Daniel, my youngest son, the one who chose to be a teacher when everyone told him it was a waste of talent, the one who married Sarah, a girl from a humble family who worked cleaning offices when they met, the one the whole family looked at with pity mixed with disdain. I have to confess something that shames me. I had also looked down on them, not openly, but inside. When Daniel introduced me to Sarah, I expected more. I expected a girl from a good family. I expected useful connections. I expected someone who would elevate my son's status, not someone who would keep him in economic mediocrity. At family gatherings, Jessica and Michael made hurtful comments. They said things like, "What a pity Daniel settled for so little." Or, "Imagine if he had met someone with ambition." And I didn't defend them. I stayed silent. I let those poisonous words float in the air without contradicting them. Sarah always noticed. She saw how her smile got smaller every time Jessica talked about her trips to Europe or when Michael mentioned his millionaire patients. She saw how Daniel squeezed her hand under the table, giving her silent strength. And I looked away. Now walking toward their small house in a working-class neighborhood far from the mansions of my other children, I felt the weight of my own hypocrisy. I had judged Sarah for not having money. I had found her insufficient, and she probably knew it. Probably every time she saw me, she could feel my silent disappointment. Daniel and Sarah's house was a modest one-story building. Cream-colored paint peeling in some parts. A small garden with flowers that Sarah evidently tended with her own hands. A wooden fence that needed repair. Everything was simple, humble, honest. There was no electronic gate. There was no intercom. Just a wooden door with a simple doorbell. I pressed the button and heard the chime ring. Inside the house, I heard steps. The door opened. Sarah appeared in fro,